Right, here we go again. It's ShrimpsNet number 50. Is it number 15, Joel?
I think it might be.
Yeah, 15. I'm losing count. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. We got a lot of lovely feedback from close friends and family after last week's All Our Yesterdays. So with the international break, we'll have a quick discussion on that, and then we'll talk about the Burton game. And then we'll have another trip down memory lane. I'll let Joel tell us what he's come up with. But as usual, it's with me and the Eric Morecambe to my short, fat, hairy legs, as usual, is Joel Shooter. Welcome along, Joel.
Cheers, Freeze.
Back by popular demand, his dad rang and said, can he come on again? It's our business guru, Mr. Michael Gibson. Posh, welcome.
Thank you again for having me back.
And a first-time guest with a new voice on ShrimpsNet, but it's a voice that you will quite probably recognise. It's our esteemed matchday announcer of 20-odd years, Mark Swindlehurst. Welcome along, Mark.
Thank you. I'm not even esteemed in my own house, so I don't know how I could be esteemed.
Yeah, well, Veg gets esteemed in my house, so there you go. So it's been international break, so we've got nothing to talk about other than the fact that obviously, thankfully, Alfie and Jokel have come back free of injury. They've probably got a few air miles, but they've done all right otherwise. What do you reckon, Joel?
Yeah, no, it's good to see that they've Jokel making his. I think it might have been his debut for Iceland under 21s. I saw some clips of that on YouTube. He made a couple of decent saves, which I know we were talking about last time on the podcast. Maybe his confidence looks like it had taken a bit of a dip. So having that game with his international team and making a couple of decent saves, they lost, but he didn't really do anything wrong for the goal. So maybe that's given him a bit of a confidence boost. And again, McCalmont was with the under 21s. I think he played the 90 minutes for them, and then gets called up to the senior side once again. So again, that's that's got to be another boost for him. I don't think he played for the senior side, but it's another boost. And it's probably quite good he didn't play for the senior side because he comes back nice and fresh for us. I think the one downside probably is Ryan McLaughlin being injured on international DT. So Stephen Ramson's just mentioned that on an interview that's come out earlier this evening. So it'll probably be Ryan Cooney back at right back on Saturday. But yeah, not too sure how long McLaughlin's out for, but hopefully not too long.
We're playing Friday.
That's going to catch me out.
That's just about to say that. I'm going to come to Swids and Posh now because, and it's been touched upon already, McCalmont probably had his best game in the Morecambe shirt in the 4-3 defeat at Wickham. Agree or disagree, Swids?
Yeah, absolutely. He's been valuable this season for sure. And I'm still kicking myself over that match. It could have gone the other way for us, and I'm just still trying to think what happened.
Yeah, it's not easy to dissect, is it? Because he did 3 goals in injury time. We were winning at Ipswich, and that went down to a point. And then obviously we were drawing in the other 2, Wimbledon at home, and then. But we're entertaining, Posh.
Oh, yeah. No, we're going to talk about Burton in a minute. It's an interesting thing about that. I mean, we scored 20 this season in 12 games, and we've conceded 18. And then you look at Burton, and they've scored 11 and conceded 9. So double the amount of goals in games, with very different contrasts between the sides. And Christ, we're entertaining. But what was interesting mentioning about Alfie McCalmont, and I think it was followed up from the discussion we were having last week, is that players just seem to be growing into the squad. And Alfie, showed tons and tons of promise when he was at Oldham. But I think when he came into League One, I think he found it a big step. And you can see him gradually, game by game by game, appreciating what needs to be done and the level he's playing at. And he's just getting stronger and stronger. It's great to watch.
And to be honest, Joel, that's the same with quite a few players, isn't it? To be truthful.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a contrast, and we get to see some of the players like Jones yet. But yeah, with McCalmont, you can really see him growing and finding a bit more of a role, especially as kind of Phillips has come into the side a bit more. And I think Phillips has taken to it quite quickly. I think obviously he had a little bit of time in League One last season. I think it's just kind of come across. I think it was Michael Appleton I once heard does it likes to kind of work this way, but I think. Might be him, might be another manager, but he generally tends to prefer to work with people who are on their second loans in a certain division, because the first one's almost like a bit of an acclimatization, and then the second one is obviously, when they're going to find their feet a bit more. But obviously, they're not always going to have the luxury of that. So at the moment, it's just, oh God, sorry, just smacked my phone on the surface. Apologies, you heard a loud bang. But, it's just letting the players acclimatise to the team and kind of get to know their teammates and kind of understand the level. But, it seems like we're coming on all right in that regard.
So moving on to Burton Albion, by the time people listen to this, some may be listening just before the game, but most people will have listened to it. I will yet again mention Tom's Shrimps Online. He does a fantastic preview on Twitter, which I actually read it this morning and sent him a text saying, do you do anything else but do these and work? And he went, no. Because it's so detailed. It's just like, dear Lord. I mean, it is. It's just very in-depth. But as Posh has already mentioned, they don't score many and they don't concede many. So I think we're probably expecting them. We may well be in a situation where we see more of the ball, just like we did at Wickham. Joel?
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm quite interested to see how all that plays out, because we've had, I remember, I think Tom pointed out in that piece that we've had roughly the same kind of possession over the course of the season. So it'll be interesting to see who kind of takes the advantage. And another stat, I think I actually heard it on Sky Sports when they had Burton versus Cheltenham on a few weeks ago, that Cheltenham, I don't think Cheltenham have won a game when they've had over 50% possession. So they really don't want to have the ball that much. They'd rather you have the ball and they kind of press you a little bit, not that intensely, but more than a team like Lincoln did, say. But, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out, whether their kind of pressing will force us to go a bit more direct, or if we'll try and play through it. I'm not really too sure. But yeah, I mean, on that, on those previews, and to reiterate what Freez said, read them if you get a chance, because they're great. And the one good thing about the game this week being on Friday is it meant the preview came out before this podcast, so I could read it before doing the podcast and look a load of stuff from there.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I think they're averaging about 43% possession, and we're averaging something similar. So that's quite interesting, because that means there's 14% when nobody's got the ball.
That's what happens. They'll just kick it in the air and out the stadium, and we'll just have to look there for a bit.
So it could be an exciting watch, and I follow that, couldn't it?
Well, there hasn't been a match yet that hasn't been exciting, I don't think, in League One. I'm just trying to think. Have we had a dull nil? No, we haven't. It's one thing we've got this season is entertainment. And I don't think tomorrow night will be any different whatsoever.
Weirdly, the tightest game was Sheffield Wednesday, and you look at that and the 1-0, and just how much went on in that game. It was absolutely fantastic game. I think this has the potential for it because of Burton's really low scoring rate and their really tight defence. That could be a factor. This is really interesting, predicting this ahead of tomorrow when the podcast may come out afterwards. So I'm not going to make any predictions, but I think one of the things that really noticed when I was having a look at Burton was that they've played 23 different players already this season in 12 games, which...
Not all.
Well, I mean, it's more than us, amazingly. But, but 23 players is, just shows. I mean, it's all over the pitch. They just don't seem to have a settled side. So we just don't know what's going to come up against us. It's going to be interesting, to say the least.
Well, speaking of settled sides, we did have a player lined up to be with us tonight. And at very short notice, unfortunately, he's been called into the match day squad, as we've just found out. So he couldn't do it. So my able replacements are obviously with us now, and we're very grateful. And the four of us are now going to discuss an idea that Joel came up with, which Joel always comes up with these great ideas. Go on, talk us through it, Joel.
Yeah, I thought more nostalgia, of course, because what else can you do? What more do people really enjoy? But looking back at some of the best players that we've had throughout the EFL and trying to kind of build a best 11 out of those players. So I've kind of gone through and made a bit of a list, and hopefully, you'll get angry and disagree with me, and because that's kind of the point of these things. And Michael and Mark and Freez, they can all have a go at me as well when I don't say the player that they want to. But yeah, so I thought that would be a good way to go for this podcast. So obviously,
off you go with goalkeepers. Skull Loach!
I know, where's ShrimpsNet Joel? No, I thought.
Oh, of course, yeah, I forgot about him.
Joe Anion.
Joe Anion.
Oh, Joe Anion. Remember
Honourable.
Joe Anion, Swids? Lost at Bury 1-0. Joe Anion threw it in the back of his own net.
Yeah, exactly. Remember that one very well.
I remember that. I was there because we defended very valiantly all game, and then that happened, and it was heartbreaking. But I think, so now we've kind of gone through our...
Go on, name more keepers. You did quite a few there. Go on.
Fond memories of 2 or 3 month loan keepers. I think the two that stand out for me are Roach and Lewis. Joe Lewis, of course. Even though he was only at the club for a short time, he was so stupidly good. But then I suppose it's weighing that against Roach's longevity, and he was brilliant for a long time for us.
Yeah, I don't think you can argue with Barry, really, because of the simple fact that he was with us so long and he saved us so many points. And, I mean, I know this has been discussed before many times, and I know we said it on our commentary on iFollow, that the goalkeeper is a position where if you make a mistake, it's not easily forgotten because it usually leads to something like a penalty or a chance or a goal. So it's a particularly tricky decision to make. But I tell you what you're saying about. I agree with Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis was absolutely fantastic. But as we talked about him last week, Peterborough broke their transfer record to sign him from, was it Norwich?
Norwich.
Yeah. So from that point of view, sadly I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think those two are probably fighting out for the starting position. What do you think, Mark?
Absolutely. So there's only one name on my list, and it's Barry. You know, I think we all look a bit back with Joe. You know, a bit misty-eyed, and it was our first foray into the football league, and and he pulled off some fantastic Hollywood saves and what have you. But he wasn't with us that long. Barry has been just amazing for us. There's not many players nowadays that stay at clubs for so long, and and get involved with the community like Barry's done, get involved in the youngsters and what have you. He's just a legend. He's a legend.
Posh?
Yeah, totally agree. Barry's just, and you can remember those great games as well. So we talked about the Krug game last week where, yes, it was all the forwards who created that fantastic finish, but it was Barry who saved the penalty to keep us in the game and turn that game around. You think about the header at Portsmouth and what a brilliant night that was, and the fantastic memories he's given us, and there's undoubtedly, every goalkeeper has their moments the other way around as well, but Barry's just been absolutely fantastic for us. There are a couple of others, of course, but you look at but they're lone players. Danny Ward, couple of games, it was phenomenal, and there's others who've contributed, but no, Barry's been there 95% of the time we've been in the Football League, pretty much. And
you could argue as well, he kept us in the Football League at Coventry.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great shout.
Well, this is going to be we're going to be finished in 20 minutes if we all agree like this. This isn't very good, is it? Joel, what are we doing here? We've all agreed on Barry Roach. Mark him down.
Nice, yeah. That's great. Right, he's written down. He's down on the paper. It's decided. And then, I think that was probably going to be the easiest decision. So hopefully...
you're right.
Yeah.
Right, well, hopefully... I'm going to agree with all of you now.
Time for a bit more arguing as we move on to right backs, because it's hard to pick out a right back, really, because we've had quite a lot of right backs who've had one good season and either moved on or maybe had a dip in form. So I've kind of I've written a load down, to be honest. I've written down Cooney, obviously.
Shout them out.
Sean Bealey had a really good season. I probably wouldn't say he's the best for us, but he had one really good season for us. Zach Mills, really good for a season. Adam Yates, good for the first couple of seasons when in the Football League. But I think I'd be veering towards Aaron McGowan, probably. Quite a few good seasons with us, but I'm not completely sold. What do you guys think?
You haven't mentioned Ryan Cooney, to be honest.
Oh yeah, no, I mentioned him at the start. Sorry.
Yeah, we had the conversation. We've had the conversation in the car, 2 away games. During last season. This must be our best football team we've ever had because we're going to get. Look like we're going to get promoted. So therefore, there's got to be. It doesn't necessarily work that the constituent parts of that team make up the best team, though. I always thought last season we were better than the sum of our parts, but when Cooney was on loan, the fact that we actually signed him now and he wants to make a name for himself in League One I've just been impressed with him, and he's probably been one of our go-to players this season who have settled pretty quickly in this division and shown they're easily good enough. I don't know what you guys think.
So I was just thinking there, about Cooney. All of those other players you mentioned, Joel, absolutely superb, every one of them. But would any of those get in ahead of Cooney? And the answer is no for me.
Yeah, I think the other argument is they're also talking about a League One side. So were those players capable of playing League One? And that obviously, we could end up just choosing this squad because the League One. I think you've got to look at the quality of the players. So there's a lot of factors for me, which is not just how well they played for us, but actually whether they went on to do something spectacular in their career after they left us.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and the other ones is did they, in a side which did okay or even really badly in a season at Morecambe, did they really, really stand out as something unique and special? And you could argue with Zach Mills, for example. We were really poor that season overall, but he got Player of the Season and he stood out. I think Bailey got Player of the Season as well. I think
he did, and then the following season he had a shocker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
too many ties, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. But so are we going for Cooney? Are we going for? I agree with what you say about Zach Mills. He was fantastic.
I would make the case for Adam Yates. Genuinely, I think Adam was part of obviously the team that played at Wembley and got us into Football League. And I think for the 2 seasons that followed, I thought he was outstanding for us. I thought he was a really, really good player. And I think when he left and went to Port Vale, everybody was we thought, what a shame, we've just lost a really cracking player, and he went on to be a real stalwart at Port Vale and was a fantastic player for them. So I think he's one who stands out as having longevity and a real successful career both with us and afterwards as well. So for me, Yates and Cooney really for me stand out.
Well, I'm going to be devil's advocate here and say you make a fair point about if they went on to better or longevity and stuff like that. But I don't care because it wasn't for us.
Yeah,
just making the point.
But our 3 great seasons got us promoted to Football League. It's not a bad thing, let's be honest.
No, true. And I think we signed him from Leek Town, didn't we?
Ooh, good question.
We did. We signed him from Leek Town. I know we did. So, he's going to search it now, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
To be fair to him, he was a Port Vale fan,
Yeah.
And it's if you get a chance to play for your team, you go and take it, don't you?
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Go on, I'll let you have that one. Who are we putting down then? Is it Yates / Cooney?
I think you got to go for one.
Adam Yates is a turncoat, whatever it is. He's a turncoat. So yeah.
Joel, it's your decision.
Go on. I'll go Cooney because I just love the sheer amount of violence he likes to inflict on people.
Actually, put him down as Cooney, yellow card.
Yeah. Just the sheer amount. Yeah. I just love the spirit, and he seems to have captivated the crowd quite nicely.
Yeah, he
went absolutely mental when we won the Mazuma in the playoffs and everything like that. So we're going with Cooney at right back. So centre back, a few of the options I've got written down: Dave Artell, Chris McCready, Sam Lavelle, Steve Old, Ryan Edwards. You mentioned Nick Fenton before, Freeze, which I thought was an interesting shout. I'm not sure he's squeezing that for me, but I think he's definitely worth an honourable mention. But yeah, I think Artell has got to be in there for me.
What about Jim Bentley?
I suppose Jim Bentley.
Well, come on, he that first season of the Football League, him and Artell both scoring against Preston North End.
That was
Yeah,
Bentley in the hat as well. So I think I'm very sold on Artell. I'm not sure who else to pick though.
I can see why you would say Artell. I can see why that. And I could see why you could vote for him and Jim Bentley at the same time. Because obviously they were halcyon days. And you've got to remember, second season in, we got into playoffs. Third season in, we got into playoffs. And that was down to sort of like people like Jim and what have you. So I think there's definitely going to be consideration. But looking at where we are now, and I think it's a fair point you make, Ryan Edwards has gone on to have a brilliant career. Like Posh said, that makes a difference. And I always thought Rhino was a good lad as well. He was one who was into his time wherever he was, and he did really well. So I'd like Artell, but I'm sort of struggling with him and Jim Bentley and Ryan, to be honest. That's my 3. Sweds?
I think I'd agree with those three to be narrowed down, if I'm honest with you. I think so. I'm thinking about now who was I most gutted about when they left, and I'm thinking it's Ryan Edwards.
Yeah.
So and also you've got to think that so Jim and Arts had a good couple of seasons with us in the Football League for sure. Jim was probably coming towards the end of his career, so he probably had his best days in the conference, you could argue. So, yeah, for me, Ryan Edwards, and I'd probably put the Ryan Edwards we had back in our team now, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
Posh?
I think when I agree with Mark, I think when one player who really stood out and said, that he could have made it at a high level, and obviously that's exactly what he did was Ryan Edwards. It was a real standout player for me. I think there's a couple of other beyond that really. I mean, I agree. The comments also about Jim and Dave Artell, and they were again towards the end of their careers and probably had seen, other things in the past. It's like what other talent. I'm not suggesting him as a person, but Mark Hughes, in terms of the quality of a player, who's gone on to do things and proven his worth in a side. I mean, Stanley fans absolutely loved Mark Hughes. We have seen other players in there who really, and he was as hard as you get really with what he could do. I'm not suggesting at all, because just the nature of how his relationship with the fans and everything else that went on really.
Twittergate.
Yeah, exactly. But one player, and obviously we talked about him, is Sam Lavelle. In terms of a player that's come into the side as literally a kid who was, towards the end, it almost felt like at the end of his career, because that's how he talked about it. He was going to go and do another job. He'd done it really disenchanted after Bolton, and Jim put his arm around him, brought him into the club, and we remember that debut we saw at Bamber Bridge, and he looked like a rabbit in the headlights. You're thinking that kid's never going to get a contract, and look at how he turned out. And the big things for me with Sam Lavelle is the decisions that he made at critical points in our history, where we had no money, where we were really struggling, and other players were abandoning us at the first opportunity. Sam signed 2 contracts and stayed with us and stayed loyal to us and enabled us to be the club that we are today. And it's that kind of loyalty in those situations where Sam could have upped and left and got more money at another League Two club or maybe even higher, and yet he stayed those 2 contracts, and they were absolutely vital to us. And then obviously, we sold him now and we made a bit of money on him. But to me, that role, and also his captaincy and his community work as well, makes Sam Lavelle stand out for me with Ryan Edwards.
I think you make some really good points saying, he captained us to promotion to League One at Wembley. That's got to count for something. What I will say with Artell is the goals. I just loved some of the goals, Crew, and he did go on to captain Crew to promotion to League One.
Yeah, but we don't care. I don't care about that.
Yeah, he didn't care about that free. But yes, I think you've made me really. I think for me it's between Edwards, Lavelle, and Artell for me.
Well, I would be happy to cede to Sam Lavelle and Ryan Edwards. Ryan Edwards was a very similar. If you remember when we got him from Blackburn, and he was like a gangly kid. And I can remember, oh God, was it Matt? It was Matt Reid. Absolutely bullied him senseless, but then he bullied everybody senseless. Yeah. But by the time Ryan left us that last season, nobody got the better of him. He was a proper man's centre half, but he could play when he needed to. But he learnt the dark arts with us, and I think that made him a better player. So yeah, I would succeed. I'd say I'd be happy with Sam Lavelle and Ryan Edwards. Sweds?
Either of those. I mean, Ryan Edwards, absolutely. Who I know he went to Plymouth. Who bought him?
I think it might have been Derek Adams.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think it might have
been. Yeah.
So
well remembered.
That seals it.
Yeah, true.
We've got Derek's seal of approval there. I think in fairness to, I think Lavelle and Edwards are 2 of probably Jim Bentley's most successful player projects as well, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Picked him up for nothing and moulded him into good players. You're right.
And Blackburn, Bolton, kind of similar-ish clubs. But yeah, so centre-back pairing of Lavelle and Edwards. And what's quite nice about that one is you can conceive that could conceivably happen at a club, and that'd be quite good for League One. I think.
Yeah, you'd hope so. Yeah,
I think it'd be good.
Yeah.
So now we move on to left back. There's not I don't think there's a huge load of options here. I think the standout, I think we mentioned before, is probably Lawrence Wilson. I think definitely got to give an honourable mention to Liam Gibson because of how good he's been over the past year. Luke Conlon was a solid option for quite a number of years, and I think you have to pay a bit of credit to the amount of time he had here. Danny Adams and his twinkle toes, of course. But yeah, I think for me, I can't really think of anybody who really would top Wilson at this point.
No, I said that before we kicked off. I can't see past Willow, to be honest. And obviously, he went off and we had some really good seasons out of him. And he went off to Rotherham, and that was when they had the fat coach driver, Steve Evans, in charge. And it didn't go well for him there. And he came back, and he was never quite the same player, but he was still miles better than anything we had at the time. And even though I remember and Swids remembers this, we did interviews with him, and he was like, every referee hated him, didn't they, Swids?
Yeah, that's what he thought in his mind. In his world, it was a very dark place. It was.
It was funny. It really was funny. He scored that last-minute winner at Valley Parade, didn't he? We won 3-2. They'd equalised in the last minute, and Willow ran down the left and smashed it in the bottom corner. And I thought, he'll be absolutely ecstatic. And he was like smiling, but he was like, oh no, that referee, I thought he was going to disallow it. It was comedy gold, honestly. So yeah, I can't see past Willow, but I mean, what do you chaps think, Sweds?
Yeah, I can't argue. So a blast from the past there, Danny Adams. Now that's an interesting one because what a player he was for us just at the right time. And, he didn't look like a football player at all. If he was in an identity parade, he said, pick out the football. You wouldn't pick him. But what a player he was for us. So I'm tempted to throw my hat that way, But Willow was awesome.
Osh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. The left back was a really interesting one because when you try to think up names, right back, I could think of loads. And we haven't mentioned Andy Parrish, by the way, for lots of things that could come to mind. But
Sure.
But thinking about left back in terms of you can't really think beyond Willow. I think one of the things, the sheer amount of games that he played for us, and he scored a goal every 10 games, which is not bad for a left back.
No.
11 goals for us, I think, in his first spell. But then, of course, the best thing was I remember when we signed him for his second spell, he came to us from Accrington. Yeah. And the only conversation I ever remember having him was, how do you come here? He says, I didn't like it there. So basically, there was this kind of he wasn't fond of Aki at all, and he did a season there, and that was it. And he said, "I'm quite happy coming back here." It was great. So it's nice to have him, have him back. But I can't, like everybody says, I really can't see beyond Lawrence Wilson, and
not that the deal needed sealing that much more, but the fact that he doesn't like Accrington, I think completely beyond doubt. As much as I'd be tempted to veer towards Danny Adams, but I think it probably has to be it's obviously going to be Wilson, isn't it? So that was a nice easy one after quite a lengthy discussion.
Recap.
Yeah, let's go to recap.
Keeper and back four, who have we got?
We've got Barry Roach in net. We've got Ryan Cooney at right back. We've got a centre-back pairing of Lavelle and Edwards. And left back, we've got Lawrence Wilson, of course.
So the big question now, obviously, is formation.
Yeah, this is where it gets...
So are we just going to go classic 4-4-2, or are we going to go 4-3-3 to tuck forwards?
Well, I would say we play 4-3-3 now. So I'd say let's stick with 4-3-3. Only because it lets you get more...
That is going to make midfield very, very, very hard.
Yeah.
That's going to make the wingers really difficult. Oh, yeah, this is going to be tricky. I think it'll get quite tough now. So let's go on to centre mids then. If we're playing 4-3-3, I think I'll have another player I'll stick in here. But let's say, so I've written down Fleming, Drummond, Songo, Digaraga. I think Wildig can qualify for that list now because of how he's been over the past couple of years. And I think if we're playing 4-3-3, I'll chuck Jamie Devitt into centre midfield as kind of like an attacking 10, and that kind of Adam Phillips kind of role.
Well, that's it for this podcast. We'll discuss this more at length next week because we haven't got time.
Wow.
How do you choose? I mean, you could theoretically choose three, couldn't you? There.
Yeah, you choose 3 from there.
Because Devitt did most of his best work either in the hole or out wide, didn't he?
Yeah.
But I take your point. Drummond, Diagaraga as the sitter, you're not going to get better than them two, are you, really?
Yeah, it's very, very tough.
I can't. Yeah, you're going to go with Drummy Posh.
Well, no, there's also, I mean, there's other names that we can all throw into this. Andy Wright was with us for a long time and was a real quality player and a real stalwart in the side. He's played in some very good teams. Gary Mcdonald.
Yeah.
Just a fantastic player, and he went on to win the Scottish Cup. Scottish FA Cup,
he was a good player.
Phenomenal player in his time. Even was it Alan Goodall just sat in the back for a few games and whatever. And he always looked solid as well. But McDonald always just stood out every game he played in. He was a fantastic player.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. But I think yes, we're talking EFL, and Drummy probably did some of his best work late in his career with us. He was definitely not the player he was in the conference. But he used his experience so well with us. So I think I'm as centre mid. I would say it is between Toombs and Drummy, but I can't separate them. Swids.
I'm with you again. It's between them two. So I'm just sat here thinking, who would I have in there now? So Toombs has just been amazing for us, absolutely amazing. Last season and into this season, his consistency for us has just been fantastic. And it's exciting when he gets hold of the ball. You don't know what he's going to do. He's unpredictable, and he can tie people up in knots. But then there was Drummy at his best. I mean, my youngest son's named after him. His middle name is Stuart, and I named him after Stuart. And then at the end of that season, he left us. So for that,
your fault.
For that reason, I'm probably going to go with Toombs. But Stuart was amazing for us on both occasions. Both times he was with us. So there was the conference, then obviously when he came back to us for the Football League, I remember the buzz I felt when I knew he was re-signing for us. It just felt like it was something special was happening. Either one of those two. If I had to say, right, which one would I want now? It would be Toombs, but Drummy would be a very, very, very close second for me.
Well, only because Drummy's 45 now.
I think I'd be veering Toombs. I think, obviously I didn't see Drummond in the conference, but obviously when he came back, and I think it was halfway through our first season back in the Football League, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
January in 2008, I think, or maybe afterwards. Anyway, when he came back, he was up until kind of maybe just after the playoff season. He was absolutely phenomenal. The goals he got from midfield, brilliant. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to go Toombs because the footwork that you look at the level he's played at, it is just phenomenal.
I'm going to be the one who disagrees then. Because for all Toombs' quality and what an influential player he's been for us in terms of getting promotion, we are looking at somebody who's been around the block, done it at a really senior level, and in terms of his career. Drummy was with us as a registered player for 17 years, right? 17 years, and I think we're talking about short-term memory here because a lot of things we can remember Toombs dancing around in the box at this season. We can remember a few of the things that he's done, and we tend to forget about what Stuart Drummond could do. And Drummy could carry a ball unbelievably. Pick a ball up on the edge of the box, run through 3 or 4 players, and lay off a wonderful pass to, like say Jevons or anybody who was playing around him. And he was so influential as a player. And then the other thing was that with him was that we're talking about progress. Well, he went on, okay, it was to Chester originally, but then he went on to play with Shrewsbury and got them, in League One, and it just a remarkable player in terms of what he's done for us and what he's done since.
The other thing as well, which I've probably forgotten as well, but not only was he amazing captain, he brought that to the side as well, and he captained Chester and he captained Shrewsbury as well. So that was also in his locker. So right, he's with 17 years, and he nearly smiled once as well. I remember the day.
Oh, did you? Did you get a photo?
I'm pretty sure I actually saw him on when they on Sky Sports when they do old reruns of their playoff finals. I think I saw one of him playing for Chester. No, not Chester. Sorry, Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury.
And he scored after about 5 minutes, I think, at Wembley.
He did. He did. So he was the first Football League player to score at Wembley, Stuart Drummond. He was also the first captain to lose at Wembley as well in the Football League, but we won't talk about that.
You just did.
In fairness, if we're going to kind of go on the whole Toombs debate, I suppose I think Toombs has lost his previous 2 trips to Wembley. So, but I think I'm going
to change my mind. I'm going to go with Stu.
Yeah, and after the impassioned speech from Posh, I'm going to go with Stu as well. And the one thing I do want to say is, and he won't mind me saying this, but when we signed Toombs, Ben Lavelle took me aside and went, we had him at Fleetwood. His legs have gone.
Well, mate,
Ben.
in fairness, I think you could actually flip that round and says that goes massively in favour of Toombs for kind of going from a point where he looked like his career was winding down and then resurging with us. And I mean, you look at him on the pitch at the end of games, he loves it. He is such a big motivational person in the team. And I remember when I came on the podcast many months ago as a guest, I remember the way that I remember feeling that the way that I remember it was John O'Sullivan on the podcast spoke about him was the kind of reverence the players have for him. Kind of made me notice. And I remember the Harrogate game as well. The communication was excellent. But so we've got Drummond sitting. There might be another role for. To be fair, we've got 3 centre mids. One's probably going to be an attacking mid, maybe.
Yeah.
But still could be room for Diagaraga, maybe between him and Fleming.
It's funny you should say that because I was just thinking Flemo, because Flemo was just, completely underrated. A lot of fans didn't like him, and I never understood why. Because we had. Do you remember that game when that Aussie referee was he called Gillette?
Yeah. Oh, the 4-0 against.
Cheltenham.
Yeah,
on
that
Easter
was
Monday.
Stupid.
And Flemo was absolutely outstanding. Every goal came from a pass from Flemo.
Yeah, ridiculous.
He was winning it. He was nipping it on the edge of our own box, running 30 yards and playing a killer pass. And I'm just like, how can you not like Flemo? He was brilliant at what he did, and I was gutted when his career was ended. I really was. I felt for the lad, mainly because he probably couldn't do what else other than be a footballer, could he? Really? So.
I think he probably found his best form he'd ever had with us in those few months before his career. Yeah, I remember talking to people. How they might have been with Fleming. I remember there was a fella who used to sit a few seats down from me and just hammered Fleming and Devitt. Weird. Perhaps he just didn't like people who were good at football. But like he used to hammer Devitt and Fleming. I was just like, what are you doing? These are amazing footballers. But yeah, have you got much to say on Fleming and maybe Toombs, Posh?
I'd give it Fleming on purely on the basis of his appearance on what was it, that the late night soccer special one where he did the quiz.
Oh,
and
what did you put in a toaster?
Kickoff.
What did you put in a toaster? Toast.
How do you spell necessary? And they spelt it wrong 18 times. Him and Dan
also,
Parkinson.
What's your chances of being fit for Saturday? 70-40. He was ace, was Flemo. I loved him.
The other thing about Flemo, and you can't base it on all the sentimentality, was that for me the big sadness with him was that it was 9 3/4 seasons pretty much, and he was about to enter his testimonial, and he deserved that. He really did. I mean, a phenomenal career, but it was like and people used to accuse him of being like. What was it, Jimmy Kelly, kind of a bit of a sideways passer and everything else. But he was never like that. He was always, if there genuinely wasn't that through ball, he'd find his man, if with a simple layoff or whatever. But there was always that killer pass in him and that vision. And, he's a lovely player to watch.
So are we now voting for those 3 in midfield then, or what? Because obviously Flemo, he could play in that attacking role. I suppose you're really going to say Aaron Wildig or maybe Cal Baker? I don't know. In that attack.
Well, I mean, this is where it gets difficult because you immediately plump in for a 4-3-3. Outrageous decision. But
yeah. Well, only because we're playing 4-3-3 now. So Carmen, how can you not put Carl Baker in there? I mean, I was going to have him out wide.
You could have him out wide.
Yeah, I got him out wide. That's what I'm going to do.
Right, yeah.
So are we veering as we welcome Mark back? I think to the Zoom call. Are we veering towards Fleming, Drummond, and Diagaraga in centre midfield then.
Swids, what do you think?
What was the question? Sorry, I've only just come back in the room.
No, yeah, Swids has been for a wee. It was. Are we settling for a midfield three of Fleming, Diagaraga, and Drummond?
I couldn't argue against that. Absolutely.
So I think you've done it, Joel. I think we've filled all three positions. Now it's going to get really hard.
It's going to go as we come to the wingers, because we've had some really, really good wingers and attacking midfielders. So I'll just quickly write down. I think Fleming and Drummond, and I think that can work as a midfield three as well.
Well, Drummond in his pomp and Flemo in his pomp used to get forward.
Exactly.
And they used to get you, half a dozen to 10 a season. And in fact, to be honest with you, Toombs will get you 2 or 3, even from where he plays.
Toombs chipped in with a couple last season, didn't he? So for wingers, this is probably where it gets a bit tricky, I think, because there's Devitt, Barkhausen, Duffy, Carlos Mendes Gomez, Baker, Gary Thompson. Just an easy set of forwards to pick through.
You've got. I'd completely forgotten about Mark Duffy. Completely forgotten about him.
Those last couple of months for us.
Oh, he was untouchable. He was untouchable. But the first couple of months were completely forgettable. And it's strange, isn't it? Because I don't know if that was one where Jim Bentley put his arm around him and said, look, Sammy Mack put his arm around him and said, look, you're a good player. Do it. I mean, it wasn't like Sammy to do that. He was just like, maybe. Well, it wasn't, and because he used to leave that. He used to leave that to Morecambe Town, didn't he? So, So maybe that happened. I don't know.
You don't pull your finger out. You're going back to Southport.
Yeah, that's enough to frighten anybody. Mello, if you're listening, I apologise. So, are we trying to pick one on each side? Because if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say probably Tom Barkhausen and Carl Baker. Probably. Argue that one, Swids.
Well, I'm not going to argue against Carl Baker because I think he was a class above when he played for us. And he went on to, again, bigger and better things using the posh scale there as well. When he came from Southport, we played against him at Southport. We knew what his quality was. But him at his best, he was unplayable. He's just superb. I'd love to have a Carl Baker back in our side now because I just think he was amazing for us at that time. And then, of course, went on to prove it on a bigger scale.
And I suppose you could argue the same with Barkey, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost the same argument. Tom Barkhausen. I just wonder what he's actually worth. So I almost think that he's it sounds terrible. He's better than Preston. I think he could have done even better if a different club had come in for him.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? Because we look at that and we're leaving out Mark Duffy, and Mark Duffy went on, Sheffield United.
You look at the way what he did for Sheffield United when the season they got promoted. That was magical, and I was so gutted when he had a little bit of a Chris Wilder had a bit of a Barney with him apparently, and decided he didn't want him for the Premier League because he was just magical in that kind of number 10. It was in a different role for us, but I could see how it developed because he was never about searing pace. Mark Duffy was about trickery, and how he developed into that kind of number 10 role at Sheffield United was amazing. But that's me. I suppose that's more me admiring the role he played for Sheffield United and how because that was such a fun and interesting side of the Championship that year.
Talking of players that went on to have a brilliant career, we won't even mention Dave Perkins.
That's what I literally was in my mind about Dave Perkins.
Yeah, you're right.
And you think about, I was thinking about that Wigan Man City game the other day. When he played in that game, and that's like not that long ago. It feels, and we never even considered him. Phenomenal player.
Not you're right. League though, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the thing is,
gone now, is he?
Yeah, that's true because he went in the season. Perks got sent off against Southport. That game we were talking about in the conference, and that was his sort of like he went to Rochdale in January, didn't he?
So, pretty sure
Joel's absolutely right. The reason we're not talking about him is because he did play for us in the Football League.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there you go. So looking at this, Posh, the argument currently is, well, and my argument is, and this is for comedy purposes only, I can't possibly foresee an 11 starting with us where we signed 2 people from Southport. So I'm going to discount Duffy on that and include Carl Baker.
And it's that direct thing about that being from Southport, and it was that we plucked 2 players that Southport fans absolutely raved about, and while I think Duffy was a great player, Carl Baker just had that energy and dynamism about him. I mean, if you remember, probably one of the best games I've ever seen at Christie Park in the Football League was the Bradford City game, where at midweek Bradford must have brought 1,500, 2,000. Basically filled that entire end. And it was one of them nights where it was crystal clear. There wasn't a breath of wind, and the atmosphere was utterly electric in that North Stand. And we were, I think it was 1-1, but we were just surging one wave after wave after wave towards the goal. And it was one of those games where the fans don't sing. There's just because there's such a good atmosphere, the energy and just people just booing and making noise, guttural noises as they surge forward was all it needed. And we were just kind of sucking that ball. And then when Carl finished off that game for the win, it just absolutely one of the best games I've ever seen, and one where he just ran the show in that last 20 minutes to just, it's spectacular to watch in certain games, Carl.
So there's 2 of us on the Barkhausen fans. We haven't mentioned Gary Thompson. Gary Thompson had a fantastic career with us and went on again. Promotion at Scunthorpe, got into the Championship. Tomo was brilliant for us.
Yeah, and talking to Bradford City, that FA Cup run with Bradford City, I think he was part of that, and he was on a good one with Wickham. I think Barkhausen would edge it over Thompson for me, probably, just because look at the consistently, as Mark mentioned, consistently one of Preston's better players for the past 3 or 4 seasons. I think, and just how spectacularly. I mean, I suppose Tomo did a similar thing. They both had that ability to just blast the ball past people and run, and nobody would ever catch them. I think I'd veer to. Sorry.
I think with Tomo, though, arguing against him here a little bit, you always thought when he was with us the first time, and we won't talk about the second time, but the first time he was with us, you always thought he had a little bit more to give.
Yeah.
And he had a little bit more that he was just leaving, and if he'd have given that extra bit, what a player he could have been, and we probably wouldn't have been talking about anybody else apart from him. But you always had that suspicion there's a little bit more that he was holding back.
And I think the other thing to add to that as well is that, again, the majority of his career was in the conference. I mean, he really only had that 1 season with us, and he didn't. I think, under was it only 1 season? I think. Anyway,
1 season.
Yeah, that was it. 1 season under Sammy Mack, and he was like, he wasn't really that fussed. But I think when you see some of the games, and we always talk about that Margate game where FA Trophy away, and Tomo, I mean, how he beat the 2 fellas down the line was unbelievable, and he just left them for dead. But he came at an angle and he whipped this ball in from an angle where he was actually facing the stand, and he managed to wrap his foot round it, and John Norman volleyed it in. That player was an extraordinarily talented player. But in that last season, his 1 season in the Football League, I think there's 1 game against Chester where he had 4 assists in a row from the same corner. But apart from, I can't really remember much that he did in the Football League. And I just think he was almost disenchanted at that stage. It was almost like, we've made it. I'm not getting the thing I wanted, and I'm in the Football League. I can do better than this. I can move on and whatever. So really, his spells, it just wasn't in the Football League, wasn't quite as dynamic as anyway.
I'll stick up for him. I don't think, I think he got 12 assists in his first season in the Football League with us. So I wouldn't say, I think that's a bit harsh. I think he was very... Yeah. I thought he had a very good season, but I do agree Barkhausen's in there ahead for me. I'd like to argue Duffy, but I think you're right. It's got to be Carl Baker ahead of Duffy. As much as I really enjoy Duffy, I think a lot of my enjoyment with Duffy was watching him in the Sheffield United side. Carlos, I think, needs an honourable mention.
Yeah, Carlos was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. No question. And but the point being is, obviously, Carlos was. Again, I'm still arguing that the team was better than the sum of its parts, whereas perhaps the team that Carl Baker was in had slightly more talented players. So Carl found it easy to be the sort of fulcrum of all the attacks, really, whereas Carlos he changed his game completely, didn't he? He kept the ball well. I mean, some of his assists for Phillips' goals and stuff like that got us promoted.
Oh, yeah, wonderful.
Lovely the way they worked.
We're going to be accused of being old-fashioned and retro because we're old blokes, apart from obviously you, Joel. That we're all digging into our deep and distant past to choose the best players. But it's very, very, very. I mean, Carlos. Obviously, we don't know the final amount of money, but we know it was
a lot,
$500,000 at least. Is that he's the player that somebody came along and actually paid the most amount of money for ever in our history by a quite substantial margin, and we're actually missing him out, and got us into the Football League with his winning goal at Wembley, albeit from the penalty spot. It makes it very difficult to argue against having Carlos in the side.
Can we put him first on the bench? Can we put him on the bench then?
Oh, yeah, we can on the bench, can't we?
He can be first. Yeah, he can be first. Yeah, first name on the bench. I think.
A couple of seasons earlier, and it just came too late for him. If we were talking about best 11 in the conference, but he did play for us in the Football League for 2 seasons, Michael Twiss.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'd make the case for Twissy anytime.
Exactly. If it was best conference 11, Twissy's in there.
Yeah.
He's either left wing, right wing,
One of my great sadnesses supporting Morecambe is I think Twiss had an injury or something, didn't he, before the promotion, and he was still really good.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was ever quite the same, and I never saw real prime Twiss just before that promotion season. Unfortunately,
sledgehammer of a left foot.
Oh God!
Yeah,
sledgehammer.
I've seen the few YouTube videos and they're pretty spectacular. Just one more, I think, honourable mention for Football League players. I think Jamie Devitt, really good.
Yeah,
some really good creative stuff with us. I think he was a really good part of that. The highest finishing Jim Bentley side that finished 11th in that kind of in the whole.
Yeah.
Really
and it's a strange one because you look back fondly at that, as we said before we started. We look back fondly at that team with like Jamie Devitt, Sean Miller, and Tom Barkhausen, and like the 5-2. Was it 5-2 at Wimbledon, and where Sean Miller scored from 40 yards and Barkhausen ran rings around him and blah blah blah, and we were still only mid-table.
Yeah, the weird thing is, sorry, go on. Sorry, Mark. Sorry.
I was going to say, so Kevin Ellison isn't even on our list, is he not? Is he?
Well, I was going to put him centre forward in the mix of centre forwards.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good check. Well, we can move on there now because have we agreed it's Barkhausen and Carl Baker?
Yeah, well, yeah, Carlos and this making really hard work because Carlos and Kev, what Kev did for us is just extraordinary. And if we are considering him as centre forward, it's a bit of a weird position for him, but okay, we'll take it.
Scored enough goals.
Yeah, record ever Football League goal scorer. I know. I just don't think he ever had much of a chance of getting on the wing against the qualities of player we've kind of discussed, like Barkhausen and Baker and Duffy and Carlos.
And Tomo and
but yeah.
Also, when you think about where Kev scored his goals from, so if you think about the Rochdale one was pretty much just to the left of the centre, and then that one against Wickham where he volleyed it over the keeper was from far wide right. Kev could appear in a game where he's got that freedom, could just appear anywhere and score.
Just some magical moments over the years with Kev. And I think there's the semantics here. If you're talking about the best player or the greatest player. So if we were talking about the greatest ones, Kevin have to be on that all-time greatest because of what he did over the years for us.
Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't argue that. But so who else have you got besides Kevin centre forward, Joel?
Centre forward, I've got Stockton, of course. Just amazing over the past couple of years, and did a pretty good job for us before that. Redshaw, good player. I don't think he'd be my number one choice, but I think he's worth a mention. I've got to throw Phil Jevons again, same as Redshaw. He wouldn't be my number one choice, but I've got to mention him. He's scored the most goals of Morecambe players ever scored in an EFL season. I think he had 18 or 19 in that playoff season in 2009-10. So they're both players mentioned, but I think for me, it's probably between Stockton and Ellison, unless anybody's got any other.
Well, there's 2 Paul Mullins.
Yeah, the 2 Paul Mullins. Yes, that's a good point.
You look at what Mullins did last year at Cambridge. Yes, he didn't do it for us, but I say this all the time. Mullin never ever let you down. He gave 100% every single time he pulled on a Morecambe shirt. Did Paul Mullin, and I can remember away games where we were absolute garbage, and Mullen was the only one pulling his tripe out with 10 minutes to go when we were like 3-0 down, determined to try and get something from the game. And I admired him for that. I did. I'm not suggesting we put him in, but
you're right.
He's
definitely worth mentioning because
an honourable mention.
Yeah, he had to do a lot on his own up front in not a particularly dazzling side, and he put a really good shift in every game. Has anybody else got any thoughts?
I can't believe we're not talking about Rennie Howe.
I know, I was about to say, yeah.
Rennie Howe.
He was very good for that season, in fairness.
He was.
Sponsored by Nando's.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can, Cole Stockton, again, over the years, what he's done for us, he's always played well for us. And at the moment, he's just having the best time of his career. We're all worried to death that we're going to lose him in January. And if the money's right, then, of course, we will lose him in January. If he carries on the way he's doing, he could be, he could surpass all of any records anybody's have. You talk about the record that Jevons had. He'll surpass that if we have him all season here, for sure. So he's superb. He's come on. He was great for us last season. This season he is immense. What's happened over the summer, I don't know. But his confidence is up. His presence is massive, and he's putting him away for fun. I can't see past him.
Posh?
The only thing I disagree with Mark is that he said about what he started off this season is also how he ended last season. I mean, I think he scored
6 and 8.
6 and 8 in the last games. I mean, he was that real determining factor that kind of, we needed to drive us to the end of the season and keep us in the playoff places and stuff. And he was such a massive factor in that. His goals were crucial, really. And how many did he score in the season? I think it's 10.
I think
it was 10.
13 in the league.
Oh,
15 overall.
Oh, right. I thought it was Carlos who scored 13. But anyway.
No, 16. He got 16.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. So, but to have that big contribution at the end of the season and just push us over the line was brilliant. It's really, really hard though to make a decision between Cole and Kev. I mean, Kev's impact in games and his approach to games and the entertainment he provided, even off the ball and everything else that came with it. Kev, to me, and people go on about these kind of things, like Devitt when he left. Devitt wanted to stay. He had a contract agreed, and something changed on his contract. We all found about later, and he would have stayed. And yet he gets a bad rap because of it. And Kev as well, because of what happened and everything else. And then obviously the clashes with Derek. I don't think that takes a single thing away from how brilliant he was for us and the impact that he had as a player. When he scored more than 10 goals in the season, what was it, 4 times, 5 times? He had such a big impact and spectacular goals. It's so hard to argue. Cole, the only negative you could possibly say is early on his time with us, he didn't score many. That he held up the ball well and did everything else. But what's happened since is utterly spectacular. You're asking me to do something which seems absolutely ridiculous, which is to make a decision between 2 players I just think have been made phenomenal contribution to us.
I definitely put Kev on that bench next to Carlos.
Yeah, and Carlos. Yeah, and Mark Duffy. I agree, and I think I'll point to what Swid says. If you're saying best 11 or greatest 11, Kev. I mean, everybody's got their favourite Kev story. Tying that centre half shoelaces together so that he couldn't get up. For Cheltenham centre half, and then he gets up, falls over, and he's trying to untie his boots, going, "Book him, get him booked, ref." And Kev's just walking away laughing. It's just, the man was just comedy genius. And I tell that story all the time of Rodney Parade at Newport in the very famous game with what was he called? That
Tom Naylor.
Tom Naylor. And they were winning at the time. And Kev, the ball went out, and Kev, it rolled about 30 yards down in front of the Rodney Parade paddock, which was always very vociferous. And he went and picked it up. I went to take a throw in 30 yards further on, and went like that, and the entire paddock went, "Hey!" And he just dropped the ball behind his head and went, And they all applauded him.
And Plymouth, where the very large fan was having a go at him, and he shoved the ball up his shirt and was taking a mickey out of him. And he had about 3,000 Plymouth fans in that stand just killing themselves laughing. The other time was when they had to replace the flag at Christie Park, and he ran out and pretended to go and spear half of the other players as he ran across with a flag to take the other corner. There were so many other moments with him.
He could probably do a whole podcast on Kevin Ellis.
Yeah, he definitely could. Yeah. So what are we going to do? What's the decision, Joel? You've got the deciding vote here.
I got the deciding vote. So, hold on, what is everybody else decided who they're voting for?
Well, I think you've all argued brilliantly.
I'm abstaining
for Kev, but because we're in League One now and Cole's scoring for fun, surely it's got to be Cole.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and to be fair, Cole started hitting some pretty amazing volleys.
Yeah,
I can't argue with that. So there you go. That's it. That's our 11. And subs we've already decided were Joe Lewis, Carlos, Mark Duffy, Jamie Devitt,
Kevin Ellison,
Dave Bartel.
Dave Bartel. Yeah. And
Adam Yates.
An honorary mention only because, and Mark will remember this one, we were doing the commentary at Oxford and Nick Fenton came out and threw up just before the kick-off in the second half. And the referee, he went, "Are you all right?" And then they called the groundsman on, and he came on with a shovel, and his mate came on with the bucket of sand. It was like being sick at school. It was one of the funniest things ever, wasn't it, Swids?
It was amazing. Yeah, there's a little cart, wasn't there? It was like a pair of clowns, weren't they? You know when the clowns used to come on, throwing the buckets of sawdust about. You know?
And he did. He had a bucket of sawdust, and he was there, and he was like gingerly trying to pick up this sick. Obviously, not really bothered if it went into the ground. And then he stood back, and he went to his mate. Go on. And his mate got a handful of sawdust and went. And then they walked off, and it all took about 5 minutes. And the ref's like, "Come on!"
I still suspect he had one of the pies because I had one of those pies at down there, and they weren't great.
So
I think we're about 2 hours now, anyway.
Yeah, we've done about an hour after promising we tried to do 45 minutes.
Nightmare!
In fairness, we had a lot to get through, so I'll just finally go over the 11 just to kind of wrap things up. We've got Roach in there, Cooney right back, Lavelle and Edwards at centre back, Wilson at left back, Fleming, Diagaraga and Drummond in centre mid, Barkhausen, Stockton and Baker up front. So that's our best.
I would pay a lot of money to watch that side in their prime.
And there will be people listening to this going, "Absolute rubbish. I'm writing in and complaining and blah, blah, blah." Please do.
Yes, it'll look really good on Facebook and social media if you're all fighting in the comments, That's literally, that's what we all want. So
it's all about opinions. It's all about opinions. And just because ours is right, it doesn't matter.
And on that note...
I'll tell you what, one day, though, doing an opposition 11 as well and having players like Edgar Davids,
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I always like that the Edgar Davids story where Georgie was doing the teas and coffees and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'll have a tea and a coffee." And she went, "Well, what do you want?" He went, 4 spoons of coffee, 3 tea bags, 2 sugars, all in 1 cup. And no wonder he got booked that day, is it, really? Anyway, we better wrap up because we've gone to an hour. But we hope you've enjoyed this. It's been all our yesterdays. We've been joined by our business guru, Michael Gibson, the matchday announcer, Swindlehurst, and obviously, as I said before, the Eric Morecambe to my Ernie Wise in Joel. Thanks very much. This has been ShrimpsNet. Hope you've enjoyed it. It is the AGM next Thursday, which I think we've got plans to maybe do a bit of filming. Joel, is that right?
Yeah, we're hoping to get something filmed, and we're hoping to maybe have a couple of players in for a live Q&A. That might be a bit of a struggle, we're being told, because of there are kind of tighter COVID protocols. But we'll have to see, and we'll try. And if not, we'll have to try and sort out something. But we'll keep you updated throughout the week.
And you never know. We might yet get down to Posh's idea of the best 11 that we've played against. That'll probably take 2 hours. So there you go. This has been ShrimpsNet. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the lovely feedback that you're giving us. Have a great week. And hopefully by the time you listen to it, we've beaten Burton 3-0. See you then.